This is a short video just to explain the assembly of the Roboslam chassis and connecting the motors to the chassis. So there's several different parts here which we're going to be putting together. That's the lower main plate, that's the upper main plate, and these are the side brackets here. I'm using different coloured parts for the different panels in the chassis just so that it's easier to see. Yours may be a different colour, the ones that you've received in your kit. Then there's the front bumper, which is this part here, and the two side plates of the chassis, which my ones are yellow. And I'll also be putting on the wheels and spacers later, but I'll come back to those when we do the motors. So the first part is to take the top and the bottom plate, and these are two similarly shaped plates, but the top one is the smaller sized one, so one is slightly smaller than the other. And we're going to connect these together using the side brackets. So this is one of the side brackets here in green, and I'm just sliding it into the receiving slots on the two sides at the front of the upper and lower plate. So you can see there it's gone in at right angles and it's kind of sat in, they slot into each other there. There's another matching one symmetrically opposite it on the other side. So that's the two side brackets holding the top and bottom plate together. Okay, now the side plates are going to slide onto the side here and lock into those other pieces that we put together, but before we attach them on we need to connect a motor to each one. Now it's important when you're connecting the motors not just to get the motor the right way around on each one of the plates, but they must end up being a mirror image of each other so that the motor is always on the outside of the robot. So one will go on the left side of the left plate and the other will go on the right side of the right plate. So I'll do the left motor first. When you look in the side plate, the biggest hole there is the largest hole is the rectangular hole here, and that's basically going to be where you feed through the two motor wires, which will be connected up to the circuit later on, so you can just feed them in there. There are two small holes in the plate, just here, and these are ultimately going to match up with two very small holes in the motor here and here, and we're going to put a piece of wire through there and tie it on the other side to hold the motor in place. So here's looking at it from the other side, the two wires coming through, and you can just see the taped end of the motor there through the rectangular hole. These are the other sides of those two holes that I mentioned earlier, here and here. So I'm using a piece of wire here. The colour of the wire doesn't matter too much, but it should just be a piece of single core wire, so it has kind of quite a stiff, bendable feel to it. And I'm going to return to the motor side of the plate here, and I'm going to feed one end of the wire through there so that it comes out the other side, and take the other end of the wire and feed it through here so that it comes out the other side. So I've ended up with the two ends of the wire sticking out on what will ultimately be the inside of the robot. Now I want to press that down quite flat to the motor on the outside here so that it doesn't end up rubbing against the wheel. The wheel will be fitting on here, so we need to make sure it's not protruding up too much there. So you can see I've pushed it down quite flat, and I'm just going to tighten that on here. The most important thing, you see I'm kind of twisting the wire here like so. What I've aimed to do there is to get the twist in the wire, the part where the wire twists into a kind of a coil. I've tried to get that halfway in between the two holes. If you make that twisted coil there too close to one hole or the other, there's a danger that it'll interfere with the robot actually fitting together later on when you assemble the side plates onto the side of the robot. But if you keep that twist in between the two holes, you reduce the chance of it getting in the way later on. Now we can trim down these wires later, but I'm not going to worry about that for the moment. I'm just going to leave it as it is there. Maybe I'll just flatten them down together. Okay, so that's one side. Now the way that that's going to actually fit onto the robot is it's going to be going on the side here. I'll put it on properly in a second, but just to show you where it'll fit on, it'll be there. Now this is the part that I mentioned earlier, that it's important not to get the other motor on the wrong side. If I was to fit it onto this side here, we would end up with one motor inside the robot, so that would be no good. So this one needs to be like the mirror image of the first plate that we did on the other side. Other than that, it's identical, so I'm going to feed the wires through the rectangular hole. Again, that's looking at it from what will be the inside of the robot. And I'm also going to use a second wire. Again, it's an orange wire in this case. I'm going to feed that through from the outside, which is the motor side, feed it in through the hole in the motor and all the way through the plate. So you can see the wire coming out the other side there. Same thing through the other hole. Again, press it down flat and twist it tight. So that's that motor held on there. So you can see the two motors are like a mirror image of each other here. Okay, I'm going to fit one of them into place, and this takes a little bit of care, and in some cases you can find that the that the chassis plates fit together tighter on some robots than on others. It just depends. There's some variability in the thickness of the plastic that they're cut from. So if yours is feeling difficult to put together, don't worry. Just don't be too rough with it though. If you push it too hard, the plates are brittle and they can snap if you force them together. And I'm just having a bit of trouble getting this one in. So if this happens, a good idea is to just check the individual pieces first to see whether they're tight. So I can see that plate is very tight going in there. So in fact, I'm going to use a file just to take down the edges on this a little bit to make it fit in more easily. So I'll just get a file. That could be forced in there, but the danger is that either this part would break or that the side plate would break. So it's better if it's really feeling very stiff going in, it's better not to take the chance and just to file it down a bit. So I'm basically just reducing the thickness of the piece of the plate, the side bracket, which will fit into the receiving hole. Now you don't have to be too precise about this, it's basically just to try and reduce the width a little bit. Just try that in the plate on its own. Yeah, that's feeling a bit better. So I'm going to put that back into place in the upper and lower plate, and I'm going to try fitting on the side plate again. Okay, so that's gone on quite nicely there. You can see the way it should end up. There'll be quite a nice tight fit between the side bracket here, the upper and lower plates, and the side bracket there. They should all fit together into a nice tight joint here at the corner. On the outside of the side plate, you can see that the motor ends up nestled in between these two protruding parts of the top and bottom plate. So that helps to hold the motor quite firmly at the side. The wire stops it from falling off out this way, but those two plates there stop it from twisting around once the robot is actually all put together. And you should end up with the two bolter wires coming out on the inside in between those two plates. Okay, I'll try, the second side is going to go on here, but one of the easiest parts to forget is to put on the front bumper. So if you forget to put that on now, it'll mean you'll have to come back and take it off later. So the front bumper is going to be sitting at the very front of the robot, and we're going to use that to attach our colour sensor onto later on. So don't forget to put that in there, otherwise you'll need to come back and disassemble the robot again. Okay, so that side went on a lot more easily. So you can see that motor is held there quite nicely between the two plates again. There's our two wires coming up. So far so good. So this one actually is holding together quite nicely. There's not really much danger of that falling apart. However, some of them are a lot looser. So we do provide cable ties, and there's two anchoring points here where you can use these cable ties to hold the two side plates together. So the first hole is just here at the back of the robot above the taped end of the motor. And I'm going to put the cable tie through there and through the matching hole on the other side. So you can see the cable ties going all the way through the robot. Now rather than loop that back around here, I'm just going to use the end of a second cable tie here to fasten it. So put that on there. Get this right. Okay, so that's that, and I can trim that down. So that's one point that's going to hold it together, so that stops the two sides falling off the side. As I say, some of the chassis fit together a lot more loosely than others, so in some cases these cable ties are really important. In this case they're not actually having too much effect. Okay. So the second set of holes are at the front of the robot at the bottom. So this is looking at it from the side. You've got one cable tie up here and one down here going all the way through to the other side here. So I'll trim that one down as well. Okay, so that's our complete chassis and motors. To add on the wheels, it's very straightforward. There's just, each wheel has got a spacer which looks like this, and that slides onto the motor shaft first. And then the wheel itself is the larger disc, and that should also fit the shaft of the motor quite snugly, so you can see that's gone on there. Now that's looking at it from above. You can just see that the spacer holds the wheel out from the body of the motor a little bit to stop it rubbing off the wire, and there's a little sort of a plastic bump on the side of the motor there as well. So it's important to remember that spacer there. If you don't put that on, there's a danger that the wheel will rub and create friction, which slows down the robot or might make the motors drive at different speeds. So spacer on first, and then the wheel. Now in some cases the wheels can be a little bit loose and they're in danger of falling off. Here, these ones actually feel fine. There's not much danger of that wheel sliding off itself. But if your wheel is loose, there's no problem. We can just put a little bit of double-sided tape on there before pressing the wheel on after the spacer, and that produces a very, very snug fit. So don't worry if your wheel is loose, we can help you to tighten that up. So that's more or less the complete chassis and wheels there. We're ready to put the circuit down on top now, but we'll come back to that again.